One of the greatest thefts in art world history was not stolen diamonds or gems from a baron. It was not an attempt on the Mona Lisa or the robbery at the Gardner. This theft took over 4 years and targeted all of Europe, and was carried out by one Adolf Hitler in the midst of World War II. Hitler was able to pull such a feat off by amassing a small army of SS personnel and art experts, whose job it was to seize and confiscate some of Europe's most prized treasures. In response, it was these men, a group of allied thinkers, artists, experts, curators, and historians, soon to be dubbed the Monuments Men, who discovered and recovered much of the Nazis' stolen bounties, from farmhouses in the Ardennes to castles in the heart of Germany. Born April 20th, 1889, Hitler in his early life always gravitated towards the arts. But after his dual rejections in 1907 from Vienna's most prestigious art school, he soon realized it could be nothing more than a hobby, and turned to architecture. Soon depression and lack of money denied him his second career. Despite this, Hitler carried his thirst for art through the years to his ultimate rise to power in 1934. By the start of World War II, Hitler rolled out his plan for the conquering of Europe, and the acquisition of European art right alongside it. Work that the Führer liked was stolen, artists he didn't, and there were many he labeled degenerate. Art collecting soon gained popularity among top Nazi officials, and Hermann Göring stood out among them. Unlike Hitler, Göring took pride in the sheer size of his collection, rather than the quality. Speer, Goebbels, Jodl, and most of the party followed the leader in the insatiable thirst for artwork, and to assist them they enlisted a small army, personal experts, and historians who would compile a shopping list for them. Ernst Buchner, Baron Eberhard, Franz Dolger, Haberstock, Scholz, Ullmann, Breker, and many other museum officials used the Nazi Party as a vehicle for social success, and the men that participated in acquiring art for top Nazi officials usually became the head of their respective museums. Many people assumed that the intelligentsia, the intellectuals and thinkers of the culture, would be if not immune to the social doctrine of the Nazis, at least think twice about it, but the seizure of European art proved this to be untrue. Ullmann, for example, was an enthusiastic part of the Nationalist Socialist Party, and returning what he considered prime examples of superior Aryan art back to the fatherland filled him with satisfaction. He was the personal collector and art executive for Hermann Göring, who was second in command and the leader of the German Luftwaffe. Being in service of such a prestigious Nazi figure gave Ullmann great satisfaction, in addition to purely being able to touch and sit with these great paintings. Ernst Buchner's motivation was much the same as Ullmann's: prestige, opportunity, narcissism, although he was much less apologetic than the other art officials the Nazis employed. Even in 1945, Buchner was completely unapologetic about the role he played with the Nazis, insisting that there is no crime if it is done for the good of the superior race. Although undoubtedly there are many examples of curators resigning in the face of such a choice, trying to fight from within their establishment, sadly the majority of the people whose job it was to be art's greatest defender participated in its greatest loss. With Hitler's march against Europe, and nearly full cooperation among art officials, it was all too easy to begin the systematic rounding up of Europe's greatest and most prized treasures. Belgium was the first to feel the pain of their art ripped from them. Prized and priceless statues from Brussels to Antwerp were loaded up in the dead of night into the back of army trucks, some like the famous mannequin piece sandwiched between nothing more than 2 mattresses. Poland was the next victim of the Nazis' voracious hunger, maybe the hardest hit of all. Quickly dubbed by Hitler an inferior race, the Wehrmacht and SS commanders set out under orders to kill not just the people of Poland, but eradicate any indication of the Polish culture. Much artwork was taken from private Jewish collectors and auctioned off at basement prices, and artwork not labeled degenerate were quickly plucked by the likes of Göring and Speer. In addition, the celebrated Ghent altarpiece was broken apart into sections and transported back to the Rhineland. Maybe Poland's most prized piece of art, the royal castle, which for centuries sat in the heart of Warsaw, was simply obliterated. After the famous uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto, and an old Polish phrase circulated to a Wehrmacht captain, "The Poles will endure as long as the castle stands." Soon holes were drilled in the castle's foundation, dynamite stuffed in, and the castle was leveled. In France, curators had a little more time to prepare and hide their work. The Mona Lisa and the Winged Victory of Samothrace specifically were worthy, and transported to farms and estates throughout coastal France. The entire Louvre was transported, but unfortunately most of it ended up being found by German forces during their long occupation. By chance, the Mona Lisa and Winged Victory were never found and were returned at the end of the war to their rightful homes in Paris. As in Poland and Belgium, huge amounts of artwork was taken from Jewish collections and homes, most never to be returned. Back in America and England, few were thinking about the plight of Europe's artwork in the war fever, save a few men. These were not normal recruits. For one thing, the average age of these men was much more than the 20-somethings eager to fight. The standard age for this group soon approached 45. These men in civilian life were artists and experts, curators, historians, and museum officials. Some were already quite well known and had families, but one and all enlisted in the hopes of at least preserving some of Europe's art. This ragtag group of Allied soldiers were soon dubbed the Monuments Men, and soon after D-Day descended into the wreckage the Nazis left in Europe. There were 6 corpsmen: Captain Edward E. Adams, Lieutenant Frank P. Albright, Lieutenant Robert A. Koch, Stuart Leonard, Sherman E. Lee, and Corporal Gordon Chadwick. More were added along the way, and some were lost. Many other people that were not mentioned helped on the home front, in the respective villages and repository sites, with the government and army to create a functioning system for these men. Home front organizations were the Roberts Commission, whose job it was to provide lists and reports on cultural treasures to military units, and proposed the establishment of the MFAA, Museum, Fine Arts, and Archives Association, and the Harvard Group, whose job it was to collect and distribute information about cultural artifacts and art after the fall of Paris. The forerunners to the Roberts Commission were the American Committee of Learned Society, which was established in 1943 and based out of the Frick Art Reference Library. Their job was to protect rather than identify treasures throughout Europe and America upon a Japanese invasion. They were aided financially by the Rockefeller Group. The Monuments Men were woefully understaffed, undersupplied, and with no official rank until after the Battle of the Bulge. They often had to hitch rides with other companies, and had only one person back in the army bureaucracy to coordinate them. Despite all this, they were able to find and rescue many of Europe's lost treasures. The first major art repository was discovered when an army corporal gave a local woman a ride and, speaking a little German, was then told that the nearby mountain was formerly the Merker gold mine. The corporal told his company commander, and soon the whole Third Army, including Patton himself, descended upon the mine. The artwork hidden there was only discovered later, considered by most an afterthought. The Monuments Men were late to the scene, but soon helped to get it cordoned off and get the artwork transported home. Alongside the artwork was found most of the German treasury, totaling about $6 billion in today's currency. The Altis salt mine was the next big find, with the commencement of the Allied invasion into Germany, and Hitler's scorched earth decree. A Wehrmacht officer almost had the place destroyed. Luckily, a worker conspiracy diffused the charges and moved the artwork to dry sections. The famous winged woman statue from Brussels was found in between 2 mattresses, where it was left nearly 2 years ago. The most famous site artwork was found was the Neuschwanstein Castle. Much of the early stolen artwork of Europe was transported to the renowned castle, an ideal spot situated atop a mountain in a remote part of Germany. This was the first main repository found by the Monuments Men, and their first big test in cataloging and moving it. Last was the Bernterode repository. Set deep in Germany, this was the last major cache to be found. The legacy of Hitler's theft was extremely far-reaching, from international law to stricter and closer looks at the art world. At the end of 1945, it was decided that all of the stolen artwork would be returned to their rightful owners, including Germany, a somewhat controversial decision. Paradoxically, by the end of the Second Great War, Germany had lost a significant amount of their artwork to the Russians upon the invasion of Berlin, most of which has not been returned. A lot of these paintings were picked up by museums around the world, and despite reputable sellers, the legitimacy of the ownership is extremely hard to track. Some of it has been returned to the rightful owners by museums, many more are in the midst of legal battles over possession. There has been a major push for the stolen or ill-gotten artwork to be returned to the rightful owner, and every couple of years a missing painting is found. Precedents have been set in international law concerning the acquisition of post-World War II artwork, particularly whether museums should give them up regardless of legitimate post-war acquisition. Unfortunately, much of the artwork stolen by the Nazis, estimated in the tens of thousands, has either been lost or not returned, the majority of which were taken from private Jewish collections. To this day, Nazi art thieves, Allied war heroes, and the greatest art theft in history is still a story being unfolded.